All right, so we can start. It's the start
Hello.
of a new year, and we're all fresh and ready to do a podcast. So, what should we talk about today? That's the main question.
Lots
Oh,
of things on the agenda.
yeah,
But I,
it's
I
true.
see, Thomas, you have the most. So maybe we
Well,
start with the
we
one
the
for
last
you.
time we were talking, right? We kind of ended off on a very big cliffhanger, and I think we can maybe bring that in as just like a random point to make, and then we can see where it goes. Which is the potential merger between Microsoft and wait, what am I thinking? And Activ is it Activision? Wait, I'm like losing my
Activision.
mind
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
Errol. Like,
Microsoft and
right?
Activision.
It's Activision.
Yes.
Okay. I was like about
Yep.
to say like Blizzard or something like something
Well,
else. Like
The official title is Activision Blizzard is the company.
right? Yeah, okay.
It was
Or like
Activision,
Epic
it was
Games or whatever.
Blizzard.
Like it might be a
Yeah.
different one. Yeah. Yeah, so we can definitely dive into that and then we can like weave into other topics that we're interested in, but maybe we can give a synopsis on like what what the merger is about and then like why it's an interesting thing to talk about. Um do you want to start, Errol, or should I like give a synopsis? Because
Um,
I'm not sure if everyone here knows all the details.
I only know like the most recent details because this has been going on for a while. So if you know like the introduction, I'm a little bit hazy on those details.
Okay, well, basically, if I understood the introduction right, the headliner of like the news articles is just that Activision and Microsoft are potentially going to have a giant merger. They already have like done the negotiation and everything, but now it's just a period of time where they need to wait for the government to approve this because there's like these two big companies. One is a gaming company, Activision, and then Microsoft. Everyone knows Microsoft. Having them collide and be one company together might be like antitrust in a way, and we can go into the more specifics of that, but it has to do with just like how Microsoft will continue to make this space theirs, I guess, which is the gaming space, right? As there's only a couple big players that are in the space for gaming, especially video games, like specific names inside video games. And so like this is a big thing for maybe Sony. I don't know if you guys know, Sony has a lot of rights to like a lot of video games because they have a console, which is the PlayStation 5, right? And then Microsoft owns Xbox, like that whole line. So now it's like if they own the video game like titles, the very big ones like Call of Duty, right? Then maybe the Activision guys won't be able to license this same game out to like PlayStation. That will actually make Sony like way worse off. So that I don't know if I'm missing any big details. Errol, you can like fill in the blanks here.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the meat of it. I believe Microsoft's trying to buy Activision Blizzard for I think it was 69 billion, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know, Activision Blizzard is a publicly traded company, so they're just trying to buy them outright, privately own them. And a big issue is that, yeah, the governments are stepping in. And I say governments because it's not just in the US, but it's also in the EU too. But most recently in the US, I'm not too sure if there was like any recent updates with EU, but I know that the FTC just last month actually sued to block the takeover. And they claimed that I had to look up the quotes real quick, but the FTC pointed to Microsoft's record of acquiring and using valuable gaming content to suppress competition from rival consoles. And this includes the acquisition of ZeniMax, which is the parent company of I can never pronounce this company's name.
Bethesda.
Bethesda. That's the one.
Yeah. Which is
So
another big gaming company.
yep. So the idea is just like, yeah, you guys are basically having a monopoly, you guys being Microsoft, you guys are having a monopoly now, and we don't want you guys to suppress the entire landscape. And this is Sony's biggest point because they're saying like, hey, government, you guys, there's no way you can allow this to continue to go on, especially because there are some franchises like Call of Duty, which I believe Sony makes, I would rough estimates, I would say maybe just like billion or so a year just from the Call of Duty franchise. So Sony's concern is, yeah, you're suppressing the competition, but you're also taking away a lot of our revenue, a lot of our consistently strong revenue, which is the Call of Duty series, comes out every year. And yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a back and forth now because Microsoft is giving these agreements that basically say, hey, Sony, you guys can actually, we're still going to release games for Sony for your PlayStations, but it's only going to be an agreement. It's to our will what we say. So it's very interesting to see where this is going to go, because originally they were actually set. I think they wanted to conclude this deal and fully acquire Activision Blizzard by, I think it was spring of 2023, like this spring. But now with these, these new lawsuits coming in, I don't think it's going to be resolved probably for the next year or so. But I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how fast this is going to go. But it'll be really interesting to see if all of this pressure makes Microsoft take a step back and say, we don't want to even acquire you guys anymore. It's just too much headache, too much money. We don't want to do it. And the market is also not too good anymore. So.
But here's the thing, right? Oh, so George, you can go in. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think you're right, Errol. I think there's a good chance that they're just going to back away, because I don't even really understand why at this point in time, when we have so many different game developers and there's so much money in this market, that we still, you can still gain such a large competitive advantage by making those games semi in-house. Although I'm pretty sure they would still release those Call of Duty games to PlayStation as well.
Yeah.
Like, it was just a matter of exclusivity, like in terms of the time of the launch. I think it worked back in when Nintendo first came out, where they needed some sort of games and they couldn't get all the game developers to develop their games on Nintendo, because they didn't know what the impact is going to be like. They didn't know what the audience size is going to be like. So they made them in-house, and it worked for Nintendo. Up until a certain point. I think their stock is not doing well at all ever since Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go was kind of this point where they thought that it might move more into mobile, but it didn't. But the key point is that it worked for Nintendo decades ago. I'm not so sure this would bring that much benefit to Microsoft in 2023.
I have a weird question for you guys. If you were the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, right?
Yeah.
What would you do? Would you how would you move about right now? Would you how would you break off if you wanted to break off? How would you try to continue if you were to continue? What do you think he should be doing right now if you really wanted to look at this objectively and you were like that person?
I mean, first of all, we obviously don't know all of the details, of course, because we're not the CEOs of Microsoft. Maybe one day, maybe 2 years later, crossing my fingers. But we obviously don't know all of the details. But just right now, with the information that I currently know of, I would say that the better route, if this is possible, isn't to acquire Activision Blizzard in its entirety, but maybe just like one subsidiary of it, such as, we have Activision Blizzard, of course, but there's also, I think it's called Kings, which is the Candy Crush Saga, that's also on the Activision Blizzard. So maybe instead of trying to acquire the entire company outright for like $69 billion, I really don't know if it's actually $69 billion. I should probably check that, but it's, yeah. But instead of just trying to acquire the entire company outright, it would be good to maybe instead acquire just a subsidiary, just a small piece at a time. So don't take the entire cake, take a slice of it. And that way it's going to be much better and easier for you to acquire that slice, because it's not going to look like you're just completely dominating or taking over a massive entity now. So it's going to be a little bit easier on the whole monopoly side,
Yeah. I would ask a question to myself if I was the CEO of Microsoft of, do you really want to continue moving in the direction of those gaming consoles? Or is everything becoming more streamable to a point where you might be using your PC, or you might be just streaming games and you don't actually need to have such hardware? There's cloud gaming also that's becoming big, I think. So I'm not so sure that people would still want to pay $500 in the future for this gaming console just to have access to titles. You will have access to them through other means, because the game developers will go wherever the audience is going. So I feel like I would probably hold this deal and just reevaluate. Do you really want to bet big on Xbox? And maybe segueing into a slightly different topic related to Microsoft and gaming to an extent. I was listening to an interview with the Netflix CEO and I think founder, and they were talking about their push into gaming from one aspect, which is, you know, in my opinion, has been sort of shit as of late. But there weren't anything big. Like I haven't heard anything big. I've only heard about the push, not the actual titles that came out. But on the other hand, there's also discussions that potentially Microsoft could be eyeing Netflix as an acquisition target in the future. That was also something that was discussed during the interview. Of course, the CEO dismissed it, but I've thought of it, and it could actually potentially make sense. And if that was to happen, just let's hypothesize here, if it was to happen, it would make a lot more sense for a company like Microsoft to move their gaming division into something that is streamable, like Netflix, but then add proper titles to it, because so far Netflix has come out with some very bad games. And if you leverage that, and if you fully bet on the streaming aspect of it instead of the hardware, I think you would be much better positioned for the future.
That's,
I don't know about that. I mean, I can kind of see what you're getting at.
It's a wild one. It's a wild.
I like it though.
So far the games that Netflix has been making, to me at least, like from what I've seen on Netflix, right, have been like rehashes of like very famous games, but like parodies of them. I think they probably have different strategies, but that's what they're doing, and then they make them free to play, so you don't have to, like, usually these games are like play to win, so you spend money to, like, you know, play them, but they just wipe the game system where you don't need to pay at all. Activision, on the other hand, has not just Call of Duty, it has like a lot of other like really big names like Crash Bandicoot, Guitar Hero, Overwatch, XYZ, right? Like, it's undisputable that like Microsoft still probably most of their sales are still dependent on PCs selling that hardware. And even if you look at like the Xbox as a subdivision that just will not work out, which I think it's, yeah, like it's not maybe the best compared to a PC, right? Microsoft still owns the rights for a lot of these PCs, because when you think of gaming, you only think about working or playing games on those types of systems. You don't want to play it necessarily on a MacBook. You won't necessarily play it with Linux, right? Like it's not as common a thing that you would see because of support, right? So in that regard, it's kind of hard to see. Like, I think if they were to buy Netflix, like Microsoft, it might be best to still focus on the content library and then compete against like that realm, where they should probably like update or find a way to compete against like Apple directly, right? For the content, because they have Apple TV, or they have like, you know, something that goes against like Amazon as well, something like an actual box or a TV, you know what I'm talking about? Like something more hardware related, because that seems to be their strength. But it could also be a weakness to enter now, because it's already a very late stage market, right?
Well, what even is Microsoft's key product at this point? Azure is doing okay, but
it is.
What are they still the best and strongest and, you know, uncompeted in?
I would say three things actually. So I would say definitely from like operating system stuff, but more like just business sort of operating system. Like I can't imagine working on Excel on a MacBook. That's just me, right? Like it's a finance major, but that's one thing. Definitely the code side of things. So if you haven't like noticed, or if you're not in the know, Microsoft has been building like stupid amounts of like tech products for developers to be using, right? So VS Code, GitHub, even like, you know, integration stuff. Like there's a lot of different things that they're buying and just creating a vertical pipeline. As a developer right now, I literally only use Microsoft products down the line for like all of these things to code products on. Obviously there's like, you know, small caveats here and there, but it's mostly Microsoft. And then the last thing is actually gaming. Weirdly enough, maybe we can bleed into this later, but like it's more of the hardware of gaming. It's not necessarily the streaming of gaming. If I were to say streaming of gaming was to be Google under YouTube, and then also Facebook is not doing that well, but it's definitely Twitch as the main competitor. So Amazon, yeah.
I'm actually looking at it right now. I don't know how accurate this is, but it does seem that Microsoft Azure, the cloud services that Microsoft provides, that's actually the biggest chunk of their revenue to date, which is about
Makes
25,
sense.
30%. But the next
Makes
biggest
sense.
is the Office, all of the
Yep.
suites or a PowerPoint, that's about 20-ish%. And then we have Windows, and then we have gaming. And then there's a bunch of other things too, like they still have search, they have LinkedIn as well. That's also fairly good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I forgot they
Sure.
own
I forgot
that.
that that's Microsoft.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah. So yeah, but even that, this is 5%. It's probably not accurate, but it still is like a good chunk when you talk about a company like Microsoft.
And
And
is
then
this revenue breakdown or
this is percentage of revenue.
okay.
Mm.
So yeah, so the biggest is cloud, Office, Windows, and then gaming. Those are the biggest ones. So
Interesting.
gaming is about 10%, which is honestly that's higher than I thought for Microsoft. Out of all of the revenue, that's
I think it's growing, guys. I would not underestimate the market of gaming. If you
right.
look at Twitch revenue, and also YouTube with their gaming sector, it's growing every year, like significantly, right? Watching, view count, stats of all of these things are increasing year over year. Because more people are getting more accustomed to watching just anything, right? Streaming wise, that is like more amateurish. I wonder if that's going to evolve. I feel like a lot of the content that we eat nowadays, or consume, not eat, but like consume nowadays, is more like short media and then like more recent trends. But even then, they're still like cleaned up a bit, right? Like if you don't want to post a TikTok video, you don't have to, right? Like there's a pre-recording process. If you're doing a live stream, anything can happen. It's kind of very like free floating, and then you usually stream for like hours on end. But I don't know why, like that content is increasingly being watched more and more.
Speaking of short content, though, one of the things, Thomas, you wanted to discuss was Twitter, Tesla, the kind of interaction going on there in the
Oh
Elon
man.
Musk ecosystem. So you started off. I have as always, a bit of a different angle related to Tesla, but first let's start off with Twitter, Tesla.
So recently there's been a lot of articles for Tesla. I'm not gonna like go into Twitter because I feel like we've been talking about every single podcast.
Yeah.
Obviously there's a lot of like political tension because Elon does Twitter, but then also is doing Tesla. I think we can go into different angles, but what I find really weird is that a lot of the I would say investors right now are kind of seeing like maybe Tesla is more a car maker now rather than a tech firm, right? I've seen like a couple articles here and there, not everywhere. It's just like a couple here and there. And that's a very interesting thing to see that there's a split between that. Maybe it's because there's new entries in the market like BYD or the Raven or like Ford F-150. Like there's just so many EVs that are coming out, right? But I don't know if that's the case. It could also just quite literally be like regulations that are happening because if they really wanted to be a tech company, then Tesla would be, autonomous by now, but they can't get that approval. And as to why they can't, maybe one of the reasons because of the tensions that are happening because the guy is running Twitter, and maybe, I would say more left-leaning politics maybe don't. I'm not gonna generalize. I'm just gonna say it's tensions are there, right? I'm not gonna like specify somebody's name. I don't think that's appropriate. Yeah. What do you guys think? Do you think Tesla's turning into that? I don't know.
Tesla, I mean, I don't think it's something for Tesla to decide, but the sentiment is definitely there. It never was a tech company. Like let's be real about this. At the end of the day, what they make money from is selling a car. If they were, for example, selling EVs to different car manufacturers, which I think they do, but if that was their main revenue stream and selling software and like the autonomous component of it to other car manufacturers, yeah, then it would make sense as a tech company. But if you are producing a car and you have fixed costs, you're a car manufacturer at the end of the day. And to tie this in with another piece of news, have you guys heard of Tom Zhu, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly? Tom Zhu, who's now the head of as I understand, the head of Tesla, right under Elon Musk. He's the second person in charge now. So is this Chinese guy? He was the head of the Shanghai factory for a long time. I think ever since it opened, and they were turning cars at a much faster rate than the American factories. And recently, because Elon Musk is definitely all over the place these days, he's put him in charge of the American division, which was the biggest news of, I think, the last week of last year. And I think that speaks to many things. First of all, they definitely want to become more efficient now because they're measured as a car manufacturer, and their market cap is purely dependent on how many cars they're able to produce. So they need to increase the efficiency of their cars. And then secondly, it also speaks to the efficiency of the manufacturing in China as compared to the US, which also means that the competition from BYD and a bunch of other NIO and other Chinese car manufacturers is not, I think it's underestimated, if anything.
Really? But don't you, I mean, for right now, like you talked a little about Tesla's market cap. Don't you feel like right now Tesla's market cap is because people view it as a tech company, or do you think people are just bringing up its stock price just because of Elon Musk?
Probably there's two things that play as always, but yeah, definitely. I don't think it is viewed as a tech company as much as it was, or maybe even if it is, let's say that it's still viewed as a tech company. Tech companies now are being asked to show real profitability, and they're starting to be measured just like a regular business. So even if people still perceive it as a tech company, they still need to be showing the metrics of a real business, of a real car manufacturer, for example.
And Tesla,
I think,
they missed the estimates.
I think there's, I think it's changing. Probably like the ground is shifting under like maybe not investors' feet, but like the investors are shifting the ground for Tesla, right? Maybe it's a period of time where they have to evaluate it that way, because if they don't evaluate it that way, then there's repercussions of buying things that are maybe not intrinsic value, right? But at the same time, I really don't know, like, is that a good thing for Tesla or not? Because on one hand, I understand Tesla to be more of a company that does push the boundaries of what a car should be, right? As in, like, it should drive on its own. It should kind of be, more modern, more futuristic, right? If that sort of vision goes away because investors just see it as a car, right? Like that's just any other car, right? Does that like suck for the end user, right? I don't know. What do you guys think?
You can go first, George.
Go ahead, because I think, go ahead first.
I was gonna say, like, simply, like, it just depends, like, who's running Tesla. I mean, like, I don't think it really matters too much how, like, the public's gonna be viewing them. I think it's more so like if you have somebody like Elon Musk, or as George just mentioned, like Tom Ju, okay. If you have somebody like that, I think that the end user wouldn't really suffer. But it's still, I mean, I can't really say though. I just think as long as you have a good enough team and you have the spirit of Tesla, which is actually like creating innovative breakthrough products with the Tesla itself, the Model 3, Model X, I think then
Cybertruck.
Cybertruck. Which, by the way, I really want to know what happened to that truck. But I think at the end of the day, as long as Tesla has competent, innovative people at its helm, I think that the end user shouldn't suffer at all. I think the end user would still be able to reap the benefits of potentially, driving a Tesla that has all of this new software coming through the systems, which I don't really know how often they get updated, but no, I don't think the end user should suffer. But
I think potentially the opposite. If you have less of a focus specifically on Tesla, because it's the only EV that's really been making headlines, I think then you're going to go back, the investors are going to go back to decision making and then planning, and they'll see that there's other EV makers that are also producing cars, and the focus is going to be more on the supply chain. And more than anything, this move with Tom Ju becoming the second person in charge in Tesla, it proves that the supply chain in China is very efficient.
Mhm.
There's a lot of efficiency there. And you could say that this is partly because this is Tesla's innovation, but also it was executed in a better way in Shanghai. So I think what this means is that you're going to see other manufacturers in China that are able to produce cars at a faster pace start to having a bigger role in the global market. Well, if we're talking about, if Thomas, you asked the question about the US consumer, then for sure they're still going to be buying Teslas. But around the world, I think the Chinese EVs are coming. There's been a lot of talk about that.
There's a lot of them in Thailand already. Yeah.
Right? Just like you had the Apple originally innovate, create the first push on mobile. It's undeniable that they were the ones that created the smartphone the way that we use them today. But at the same time, the way that it got to the emerging markets and to the rest of the world is largely through the Android software and through the hardware of South Korean and Chinese firms. So I think the same could happen in EV as well. And I think it actually is a good thing that people are looking away from Tesla to the other EV manufacturers as well.
It's a split, guys. I mean, I'm looking at it like, I don't know. I think that we can look at Tesla, we look at their market share, right? And we look at it just basically as a car, then it's very easy to even say that like Porsche is making a new EV, right? Like, or Mercedes makes EVs, right? So if you don't even need to compare against Chinese products, right? You can just say like a lot of car manufacturers that are retrofitting their car pipelines or their workforce or whatever to make new cars that are EV centric. If you look at the quality of those cars compared to Tesla, Tesla does not compare, right? Like the quality, the build quality of a lot of different cars are possibly, if not definitively, better than Tesla. But at the same time, I think that what Tesla does compared to everyone else is they collect data, right? There's like 2 supercomputers inside the car. Not a lot of others do that as much. And so the intrinsic value to me for Tesla is not necessarily the build quality or even the totality of the revenue of the sales that they sell for their cars. It could quite literally be if they have to like sell it today, right? They can take all of this data they collected and all of this like AI, if you really want to get into it, right? Like that is the value because they can sell that to any of these other companies, and any company that would like be smart about it, even Mercedes, anyone, right? They would take that today. They would buy that in like even over extending value, right? Like something that's stupidly high, they would still buy it today. So that's why I'm like skeptical. Is it really a car company? We're like looking at their intrinsic value. To me, it's still like a tech company because of the amount of data they're collecting to then improve or go to the direction of like autonomous vehicles, right? Whether or not they can achieve that, that's still TBD, but like it's more like the horizon, right? It's like what is next rather than just the car itself. I don't know if other people concur with this though.
Speaking of AI, I think with Tesla we'll just have to see, because
we'll just leave it at there. We'll see what happens.
At the very start of this trend that we just don't know which direction it's going to take. But speaking of AI and Elon Musk, OpenAI has been valued at 29 billion. And Thomas, I think you have an opinion on this. So
you know what's interesting? There's only a couple big names in AI space, so like kudos to them, I guess. Like good for them on like raising that. I at the same time feel like it could be seen as an under number or it can be seen as an over number. The reason why it can be seen as an under number is that they have a lot of projects that are just more research centric. The losses that a lot of the these companies could probably incur, right, is like significantly higher, right? And in a way, you can look at OpenAI as like a incubator of like a crap ton of projects that have no real world potential, but it only takes like one of them to be like vastly successful, and then you have a new technology that like no one else has ever thought about, and it's extremely useful, right? Like there's so many of that, right? So an example of that could be, you know, obviously the imagery that you can get from like DALL-E. It could be ChatGPT. It could be a lot of different things that we see as like computer vision. That's where it seems to be like excelling at. But at the same time, the reason why it could be overvalued is because other companies that have come out like really recently, right? Such as the company that runs Stable Diffusion. they went stupidly on the other direction, right? Which is like, you don't need to pay for any of this. You could just use our stable diffusion thing, and you can use it with very low cost software. Like you can use it on consumer grade GPUs instead of like these custom things that they have to build, like the giant mainframes, if you will, of like AI stuff inside OpenAI's, warehouses or whatever. So I don't know if that's correct number, but if we're judging it off of the products that they have today, I would say it's a little bit like over, assuming that they are just seen as like now, if there's no other projects that do well.
Yeah,
What do you guys think?
it's just so there's just so much chatter about it being disruptive to the point where Google even declared, I don't know if you read about this, but they declared a code red because of ChatGPT, where they pretty much said like it essentially means like, yeah, there's this new technology.
I've heard of that.
Yep, there's this new technology and they can actually take us on. That's what it looks like. We of course don't know what's going on in those meetings, but that's what they officially declared. Yeah, it's a code red. They pulled the fire alarm. They said there's this new technology coming out, and now Google search, what makes us Google at the end of the day, regardless of what anyone else says, like, come on, Google search is Google. That could be completely disrupted. So I think 29 billion, it's one of the companies, it's probably the only company I've seen where it can actually go from 0 to 100 real quick. It can actually go to like a billion, or not billion, like $1 trillion. It's one of the only companies that I can really see be absolute dog and could go to 0, or just be absolutely insane and take on like Google, Microsoft, and all the other big tech players. So it's just such a risk, and I don't know how to value that. I mean, George, I'd love to know your opinions on this too, because something like this where it could just swing either way, I got no idea. I think
no, that's exactly how you'd value it. If Google has a code red when your software comes out, it's definitely in the decacorn range of 10 billion. Like that's a very good benchmark. Although it's not quantitative at all, nevertheless, I would say it is fairly valued, I think, right now.
Okay. But I mean, I don't know. Like, do you think they actually looked at like their revenue and they said like, okay, we think 29 billions, or do you think they'll just like 29 is a good number?
Not at all. They probably looked at it from the same perspective of Google, because now like Google would never be able to achieve this kind of valuation pre-revenue. And from what I understand, OpenAI is largely pre-revenue. They might have a small revenue stream here and there, but probably not. Google would never achieve this valuation, but with the benefit of hindsight of knowing that Google can be this $1 trillion company, if there's even a small potential to unseat them in something which, let's be honest, they haven't made very good like developments in so far. Like I haven't heard much about Google doing something like this. I think it is a fair assumption that there is potential for a very high valuation and can become $1 trillion company. Fly here.
Yeah. But what do you guys think is like, what can Google do right now? What do you think the best response could be? Do you think it's just going to be, let's just make them a $50 billion offer to buy them outright? Let's kill them right now. Do you think that's Google's best route? Or do you think it's to become maybe more innovative and create new products that can compete with ChatGPT? Or do you think it's to do nothing?
I think they should do nothing. That's just me.
Really? Okay.
I don't think this valuation is really, like, this is my personal opinion, right? I don't think it's actually, I guess I defer from you guys, right? I don't think it's actually worth what it should be, just because there's a lot of threats on this. At the end of the day, the OpenAI's true value is actually just the neural net that's running, right, for DALL-E and for ChatGPT. And the data that you look at that's running through, anyone can actually kind of access it, right? So it's just a matter of like creating another model. I'm not doubting that people at OpenAI are really smart, but there's a lot of smart people in the world, guys, right? The fact that it took only another company that we really didn't know of to make essentially that another image processing to compete against DALL-E, and then it's only valued at like not even $1 billion. And OpenAI only has like what, 5 products, right? Like, how does that work? And then you have to take.
There's a lot of smart people in the world, but You're absolutely right. And then I'm not sure even the smartest are in OpenAI. I think a lot of smart people are, but certainly not like the smartest in the world. Or there might be. In any case, there aren't as many people though that are as good as Elon Musk in monetizing things. I mean, this is the person that monetized space. So I wouldn't bet against him because his track record shows he can take anything and monetize it. So we'll see. And if they do monetize this chat GPT, then a $29 billion valuation is very reasonable.
Yeah. Well, they already have some
Mhm.
revenue from because they work with like they have developers pay to use it more extensively. But I don't think it's anything too crazy. I think maybe it's a few hundred million, maybe max. So
Yeah.
it's nothing crazy. But yeah, they don't really have a concrete model just yet. And it'll be really interesting. I mean, you talked about I think last week or 2 weeks ago where they have this chat GPT. And now it's what can we do with it? How is it actually going to take over the world? That's the big next question. And I don't think they even know really where its applications could be or will be, but they know where it can be. And that's why they're worth $29 billion. So
I think another topic that we can go into for the next podcast, we can kind of leave it as a cliffhanger. It's just maybe it has to do with AI, but it's very interesting to me that like it's a funnel, right? AI is a funnel of like the data that comes in. We can do some research about it, but like there's a lot of companies that are long-standing partners in that space of like supplying this type of data. Off the top of my head, it could be a company called Hugging Face. It could be another one called Scale AI. Those companies are only like they're not even 10 billion. Like they're 10 billion. They're not even 10 billion. They're like way below that. So maybe we can like jump into that later and to ask like how could OpenAI have like almost maybe 10x valuation when they are taking the byproducts of this data to construct their algorithms. Like what is more important, the data or the algorithm that comes from that data?
the gas or the car?
Yeah, right. But the gas can make an airplane. It's not just the car, right? So it's like it's the same analogy here.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for that. Yeah, you're right.
A lot of thoughts flowing through my head, but yeah, let's leave it at that. Let's start off the next podcast with that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this was fun. We can, resume next week and then we'll figure out when to post this. But it was good talking with you guys.
First podcast of 2023. Let's go.
Yes.
One of many.
Happy New Year's, everyone.
Yes, let's get this bread, guys.
Yep.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.